The bread was burning. Eliza Boone could smell it from across the market square, that bitter edge creeping into what should have been golden crust, and she knew the morning was already ruined. Her hands moved fast, pulling the cast iron pan off the portable stove, but the damage was done. 3 loaves, scorched black on the bottom, wasted. Behind her, someone laughed. Looks like Eliza's cooking matches her luck. She didn't turn around. Didn't need to. That voice belonged to Margaret Finch, the banker's wife, a woman who wore righteousness like a Sunday hat and wielded cruelty like a scalpel. Maybe if she spent less time eating her own inventory, another voice chimed in. Male this time, probably one of the ranch hands from the Dawson spread. More laughter rippled through the Saturday crowd. Eliza kept her head down, scraping the ruined bottoms with a knife, trying to salvage something. The cold bit through her worn coat, the same coat she'd been patching for 3 winters now. Her fingers ached. Everything ached. But she'd learned a long time ago that responding only made it worse. Black Hollow, Montana Territory, 1883. Population, maybe 400 souls depending on the season. The kind of town where everyone knew your business before you did, where judgment came faster than mercy, and where a woman alone was something to be pitied at best, mocked at worst. Eliza fell into the second category. She hadn't always been invisible. Once she'd been married to Daniel Boone, no relation to the famous one he used to joke, a logger with strong hands and a gentle laugh. They'd had a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. She'd been pregnant, glowing with it, planning a nursery. Then the tree fell wrong. Daniel died on a Tuesday. The baby, a boy, perfectly formed, impossibly tiny, followed him 6 weeks later, born too early and too weak to fight. That was 2 years ago. Now Eliza sold bread and meat pies at the trading market every Saturday, trying to scrape together enough coin to keep the roof over her head. The house was gone, sold to pay Daniel's debts. She lived in a rented room above the feed store now, a space so small she could touch both walls if she stretched her arms out. The town had been kind at first. Casseroles appeared on her doorstep. Women from the church brought soup. But sympathy had an expiration date in places like Black Hollow, and Eliza had long since exceeded hers. Now they just whispered. She's let herself go. Eating her grief, poor thing. No man's gonna look at her twice. Eliza wrapped the salvageable bread in cloth and set it on the wooden plank that served as her counter. 3 loaves left. She'd need to sell all of them just to break even on the flour. 2 cents a slice, she said to no one in particular. The market flowed around her like water around a stone. Families browsed other stalls, the butcher's table piled with venison, the dry goods merchant hawking bolts of calico, the trappers selling furs that still smelled like blood and pine. Nobody stopped at Eliza's setup. She told herself it didn't matter. It mattered. Excuse me. The voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. Eliza looked up. The man standing in front of her stall was tall, maybe 40, with the weathered face of someone who spent more time outside than in. Dark hair, gray-streaked at the temples. Eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a rancher's clothes. Heavy canvas pants, a wool coat that had seen better days, a hat with sweat stains around the band. And he was holding the hand of a little girl. The child was maybe 6 years old, small for her age, with blonde hair pulled back in a messy braid. She wore a coat that was too big for her, sleeves hanging past her fingertips, and she stared at the ground like it held the answers to questions no one was asking. How much for the bread? The man asked. 2 cents a slice, nickel for a whole loaf. He pulled out a coin without haggling, set it on the plank. 1 loaf, and a meat pie if you've got one. Eliza wrapped both items quickly, her hand steady despite the surprise. Customers were rare enough. Polite ones were rarer. You're not from town, she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb Mercer. Got a ranch up past Eagle Ridge. He took the wrapped food, tucked it under one arm. Came down for supplies. Long ride for bread. Long ride for everything. He glanced down at the girl, and something crossed his face. Exhaustion, maybe, or grief worn smooth by repetition. Say thank you, Ivy. The child didn't respond. Didn't even look up. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't push it. Just nodded once to Eliza and turned to leave. They made it 3 steps before Ivy stopped. The girl's head tilted like she'd heard something no one else could. Then, slowly, she turned around. Her eyes, pale blue, red-rimmed, locked onto Eliza's stall. Not the bread, not the pies. Eliza herself. The market noise faded into background static. Caleb said something, his hand still holding his daughter's, but Ivy pulled free and walked back. She stopped in front of the plank counter, barely tall enough to see over it. Eliza crouched down without thinking, bringing herself to the child's eye level. "Hello, sweetheart," she said softly. Ivy didn't answer, just stared with those heartbreaking eyes. "You want something to eat?" No response. Eliza reached for the basket beside her stall, the one with the day-old cinnamon rolls she couldn't sell. She tore off a small piece, shaped it between her fingers until it resembled a lopsided star, and held it out. "Just a bite," she said. "See if you like it." Behind her, Margaret Finch's voice cut through. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Caleb, don't let her—" But Ivy took the piece of bread, and she ate it. The market went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that happens when something impossible unfolds in front of witnesses who don't believe in miracles. Ivy chewed slowly, her small hand still extended toward Eliza. Then she took another step closer. "Ivy," Caleb breathed. His voice cracked on the name. The girl ignored him. She was focused entirely on Eliza, who remained crouched in the dirt, holding another piece of bread. "You want more?" Eliza asked gently. Ivy nodded. It was the smallest movement, barely perceptible, but it was the first response Caleb Mercer had gotten from his daughter in 8 weeks. He stumbled forward, his face pale. She hasn't eaten anything, not since—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Not in 2 months." Eliza handed Ivy another piece of bread. The girl took it, ate it, never breaking eye contact. 2 months? Eliza repeated. Her mother died in August. Caleb's voice was flat, like he'd said the words so many times they'd lost their shape. Ivy stopped talking, stopped eating. I've taken her to 3 doctors, a hospital in Helena, even a— He stopped himself. Nothing worked. They told me to prepare. Prepare. The word sat between them like a stone. Eliza looked at the little girl, at the hollow spaces under her eyes, the way her dress hung loose on a frame that should have been fuller. She saw a child starving herself to death because the pain of living without her mother was worse than not living at all. She'd seen that look before, in the mirror. "Ivy," Eliza said quietly, "my name's Eliza. You think maybe you and your papa could sit down for a minute? I've got more cinnamon bread and some honey. We could make it real nice." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Ivy reached out and took Eliza's hand. The crowd erupted into whispers. Caleb looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Eliza stood slowly, keeping hold of Ivy's small fingers, and led the girl to the back of her stall where there was a crate to sit on. She broke off another piece of bread, drizzled it with honey from a clay jar, and handed it over. Ivy ate, and ate, and ate. Caleb sank onto the ground beside them, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "I didn't think—" His voice broke. "I thought I was going to lose her." Eliza didn't respond, just kept feeding Ivy small pieces, letting the girl set the pace. Around them, the market resumed its noise, but the glances kept coming. Margaret Finch stood with 2 other women, whispering furiously behind gloved hands. The butcher watched from his stall, arms crossed. Even the trappers had stopped haggling to stare. Eliza ignored all of it. When Ivy finally leaned back, a little color had returned to her cheeks. She still didn't speak, but her eyes had lost some of that terrible emptiness. "Thank you," Caleb said hoarsely. He pulled out his wallet, hands trembling. "Whatever you want. Name your price." "I don't want your money." "Ma'am, you don't understand. You just—" "I know what I did." Eliza looked at him steadily. "And I'm not charging you for it." Caleb stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. In Black Hollow, nobody gave anything away for free. Everything cost something. "Then what do you want?" he asked. Eliza glanced at Ivy, who had curled against her father's side, exhausted but present. "Nothing," she said. "Just maybe come back next Saturday. See if she'll eat again." "Next Saturday." Caleb nodded slowly. "We'll be here." He stood, lifting Ivy into his arms. The girl didn't protest, just tucked her head against his shoulder. "Mrs. Boone," he said, "I don't know what you did, but Eliza, just Eliza." Eliza. He tested the name. Thank you. They left. Eliza watched them disappear into the crowd, then turned back to her stall. The bread was cold now. The pies had sold out. Someone must have bought them while she wasn't looking. She packed up the remaining loaves, wrapped them carefully. Well, Margaret Finch said from behind her, that was quite a performance. Eliza didn't turn around. Got that poor man's hopes up, Margaret continued. Cruel thing to do, really. Give him false expectations. She ate, Eliza said quietly. Children eat when they're hungry enough. Doesn't mean you worked a miracle. Never said I did, Margaret sniffed. Caleb Mercer's a respected rancher, wealthy family. You'd do well not to get ideas above your station, Eliza Boone. Now Eliza did turn, slowly, meeting the other woman's gaze. I gave a hungry child some bread, she said. If that offends you, Margaret, then maybe you should examine why. She picked up her basket and walked away before Margaret could respond. The walk back to the feed store took 10 minutes. Eliza climbed the narrow stairs to her room, unlocked the door, and set her basket on the table. The space was freezing. She couldn't afford to keep the stove lit during the day, and her breath fogged the air. She sat on the edge of the bed and removed her boots. Her feet ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, something inside her chest felt lighter. That little girl had eaten. Not much. Maybe not enough. But she'd eaten. And she'd looked at Eliza like she mattered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window frame. Snow was coming. You could feel it in the air, that particular kind of cold that settled into your bones and didn't leave until spring. Eliza pulled her coat tighter and lay down on the bed without undressing. She dreamed of her son that night, the baby boy who'd never learned to cry, who'd come into the world silent and left the same way. In the dream, he was older, 6, maybe, the same age as Ivy, and he was laughing, running through tall grass under a summer sky. She woke before dawn, disoriented, her cheeks wet. The room was dark, silent. She wiped her face and got up to start the stove. Heck, the next Saturday came with snow. Not a blizzard, but steady enough to dust the streets white and turn the market into a landscape of trampled slush and frozen mud. Eliza set up her stall with numb fingers, arranging the bread she'd baked the night before, checking the meat pies to make sure they hadn't frozen solid. The crowd was smaller than usual. People hurried through their shopping, eager to get back inside. Eliza didn't expect Caleb Mercer to show. Eagle Ridge was a hard ride in good weather. In snow, it'd be brutal. No one with sense would make that trip for bread. But at 10 o'clock, he appeared through the white curtain of falling flakes, Ivy bundled in his arms. The girl's face was buried against his coat, but when they got close to the stall, she lifted her head. Her eyes found Eliza immediately. Morning, Caleb said. His voice was rough, tired. We came. I see that. Eliza pulled out a chair she'd borrowed from the feed store. Sit her down. I'll get something warm. She'd prepared for this, hoped for it maybe, though she wouldn't have admitted it out loud. A small pot of porridge sat warming on her portable stove, sweetened with honey and cinnamon. She ladled some into a wooden bowl and handed it to Ivy. The girl took it without hesitation and started eating. Caleb watched like he was witnessing something sacred. She ate twice this week, he said quietly. Not much, but something. First time since... He stopped. I didn't believe it would last. It's a start, Eliza said. More than that. He looked at her, really looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. You gave me my daughter back. Eliza felt heat crawl up her neck. I just fed her some bread. No, his voice was firm. You did more than that. I don't know how, but you did. Ivy finished the porridge and set the bowl down carefully. Then, in a move that shocked both adults, she slid off the chair and climbed onto Eliza's lap. The girl was light, too light, all bones and angles, but she curled against Eliza's chest like she'd been doing it forever, her small hand fisting in the fabric of Eliza's coat. Eliza froze. She hadn't held a child since the baby. Her arms moved automatically, circling Ivy's small frame, and something inside her chest cracked open. I'm sorry, Caleb started to say, reaching for his daughter. No. Eliza's voice came out hoarse. It's fine. She's fine. Ivy's breathing evened out. Within minutes, she was asleep. Caleb sat back, his hands hanging loose between his knees. She hasn't slept through the night since Mary died, he said. Wakes up screaming, or crying, or just empty, staring at nothing. How'd it happen? Eliza asked softly. If you don't mind. Fever. He said the word like it tasted bitter. Came on fast. We got the doctor out from town, but by the time he arrived, he stopped, swallowed. 24 hours. That's all it took. Mary was fine in the morning, dead by the next sunset. Eliza tightened her hold on Ivy. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. There was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. But sorry doesn't bring her back, doesn't fix Ivy, doesn't... He stopped himself, shook his head. I'm tired. Haven't been sleeping much either. They sat in silence, snow falling around them, the market moving like a river that didn't care about drowned things. I need to ask you something, Caleb said finally. Eliza waited. Would you come to the ranch? She went still. What? Just for a while, a week maybe. Help me figure out how to get her eating regular, sleeping, talking maybe, if that's even possible. He rushed through the words like he was afraid she'd say no before he finished. I'll pay you, whatever you need. Room, board, wages on top. I can't lose her. She's all I have left. Eliza's mind spun. Go to his ranch, live there, even for a week. The town would crucify her. People will talk, she said carefully. Let them talk. Mr. Mercer, Caleb. She looked down at Ivy, sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knew how long. I'm not qualified. I'm not a doctor or a nurse, or you're the only person she's responded to in 2 months. That qualifies you. It's not proper. Neither is watching my daughter starve herself to death. The words hit like a slap. Eliza started to protest again, but Caleb leaned forward, his eyes fierce. I don't care what people think, he said. I don't care if they talk or judge or think less of me. My wife is dead. My daughter is dying. You're the first thing that's made her want to live. So I'm asking, begging, if that's what it takes, please come help us. Ivy stirred in Eliza's arms, making a small sound in her sleep. Eliza thought about her cold room above the feed store, the empty hours, the whispers that followed her everywhere anyway. She thought about this little girl who'd reached for her hand like it meant something, like she meant something. 1 week, she heard herself say, and only to help Ivy. After that, I'm gone. Caleb's shoulders sagged with relief. 1 week. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They arranged for Eliza to pack her things and meet them at the livery stable in an hour. Caleb took Ivy, still sleeping, and disappeared into the snow. Eliza stood alone at her stall, watching them go. Around her, the whispers had already started. Did you see that? Going to his ranch, just the 3 of them. Shameless, really. Poor Caleb doesn't realize what he's inviting into his home. Margaret Finch appeared beside the stall, her face pinched with disapproval. You're making a mistake, she said. Eliza started packing up her things. Noted. A single woman alone with a widower? Do you have any idea how that looks? I'm helping his daughter. That's what you're calling it? Margaret's voice dripped with disdain. Eliza, you may have fooled Caleb Mercer with whatever trick you pulled last week, but the rest of us see through it. You're taking advantage of a grieving man. Eliza stopped packing and turned to face her. You know what I see, Margaret? A woman so miserable in her own life that she needs to tear down anyone who might find a moment of happiness. Ivy was starving. I fed her. If you've got a problem with that, take it up with your conscience. She picked up her basket and walked away. Behind her, Margaret sputtered something, but Eliza didn't hear it. She climbed the stairs to her room one last time, packed everything she owned into a single worn carpet bag, and left the key on the landlord's desk downstairs. The snow was falling harder when she reached the livery stable. Caleb had a wagon waiting, Ivy bundled in blankets on the bench seat. He helped Eliza up, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. Ready? He asked. Eliza looked back at Black Hollow, at the town that had mocked her, pitied her, made her invisible. Ready, she said. The wagon lurched forward, and they headed into the white. The ride to Eagle Ridge took 3 hours through snow that came down like torn cotton. Eliza sat rigid on the wagon bench, her carpet bag wedged between her feet, watching the landscape transform from familiar to foreign with every mile. Caleb drove in silence, his jaw set against the cold, while Ivy dozed fitfully against Eliza's side, occasionally jerking awake with a small gasp before settling again. They passed the last recognizable landmark, a burned-out homestead everyone called the Morton place, and entered country Eliza had never seen. The road, if it could be called that, wound through stands of pine so thick the snow barely reached the ground beneath them. The air smelled like ice and wood smoke, though there were no houses visible, no signs of human life at all. "How far out are you?" Eliza asked, breaking the silence. "Another hour." Caleb's breath fogged in front of his face. "Road gets worse before it gets better." He wasn't lying. The trail narrowed until branches scraped both sides of the wagon, and twice they had to stop so Caleb could move fallen logs out of the way. Eliza held Ivy close, keeping the girl warm, and tried not to think about what she'd agreed to. 1 week in a stranger's house, miles from anyone, with a man she'd spoken to exactly twice. Margaret Finch's voice echoed in her head. "Do you have any idea how that looks?" She pushed it away. The trees finally opened up, and Eliza got her first look at the Mercer Ranch. It sat in a wide valley, protected on 3 sides by ridges that kept the worst of the wind at bay. The house was bigger than she'd expected. 2 stories built from logs that had weathered to gray, with a stone chimney at one end. A barn stood off to the left, solid and well-maintained. Corrals, a chicken coop, a smokehouse. Everything looked functional, organized, like someone had cared about it once. But there was something empty about the place now. Not abandoned, smoke rose from the chimney, and fresh tracks marked the snow around the barn, but hollow, like a body missing its heart. Caleb pulled the wagon up to the front porch and climbed down stiffly. "I'll get your bag," he said. Eliza lifted Ivy carefully and followed him inside. The warmth hit her first, radiating from a cast-iron stove in the main room. Then the smell. Stale coffee, old smoke, something sour underneath that suggested dishes left too long unwashed. The furniture was decent, well-made, but covered in dust and clutter. A man's coat hung on a hook by the door. Boots lay scattered near the hearth. Papers littered a desk in the corner. This was a house where someone had stopped trying. "It's a mess," Caleb said, reading her expression. He set her bag down heavily. "I keep up with the animals, the repairs, but inside—" He gestured vaguely. "Haven't had the energy." "It's fine," Eliza said, though it wasn't. "Your room's upstairs, first door on the right. It was—" He stopped himself. "It's got a bed and a dresser. Window faces east. I put fresh sheets on this morning." Ivy stirred in Eliza's arms, blinking slowly. "Let me show you," Caleb said, and led them up a narrow staircase. The room was small but clean, the one space in the house that looked cared for. A quilt covered the bed, handmade, beautiful, with a pattern of interlocking stars. The dresser had been dusted. A pitcher and wash basin sat on a small table. "This was Mary's sewing room," Caleb said quietly. "Before." Eliza set Ivy down gently on the bed. The girl immediately curled into a ball, watching them with those 2 old eyes. "I'll let you get settled," Caleb said. "Come down when you're ready. I'll make coffee." He left, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The walls were bare except for one framed photograph, a woman with dark hair and a soft smile, holding a baby who must have been Ivy. Mary Mercer. Dead at what, 30? 35? Too young, either way. "That's your mama," Eliza said to Ivy, nodding at the picture. The girl didn't respond, just stared at the wall. Eliza unpacked her few belongings, 2 dresses, a nightgown, her brush, the small wooden box that held Daniel's wedding ring and a lock of the baby's hair. She set the box on the dresser carefully, then changed out of her traveling clothes into something that didn't smell like horse and snow. When she came back downstairs, Caleb had cleared space at the kitchen table and poured 2 cups of coffee. The kitchen was in worse shape than the main room. Dishes piled in the basin, flour spilled across the counter, a pot on the stove with something crusted on the bottom. "Sorry about the state of things," Caleb said without looking at her. "Mary kept everything just so. I'm not as good at it." "I can see that." He glanced up, surprised, then laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Guess there's no point in pretending." Eliza sat down and wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. It was weak, barely brown, but hot. "Tell me about Ivy," she said. "Before." Caleb leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "She was loud, always laughing, always into something she shouldn't be. Mary used to say she got that from me, the stubbornness. Kid would argue about bedtime like she was negotiating a contract." He smiled faintly. "She loved the chickens, had names for all of them. Followed me around the ranch asking 100 questions about everything. Why's the sky blue? Where do the deer sleep? Can horses dream?" Sounds exhausting. It was. His smile faded. "I'd give anything to have it back." Eliza sipped her coffee. "When did she stop talking?" "The day after Mary died. I tried to explain what happened, but she was 6. How do you explain death to a 6-year-old? He rubbed his face with both hands. "She stood at the grave and didn't make a sound, didn't cry, nothing, just stared at the ground like she was waiting for her mother to climb back out. And the eating started a few days later. She'd sit at the table, push food around her plate, but wouldn't take a bite. I thought it was grief, thought she'd come around. But weeks went by and she got thinner and thinner." His voice cracked. "I tried everything, begged her, got angry, tried to force it. Nothing worked. The doctor and Helena said sometimes children do this. Grief manifests in strange ways. He said to keep trying, but..." He stopped. "I thought I was going to watch my daughter die and not be able to do a damn thing about it." The clock on the mantel ticked loudly in the silence. "Why me?" Eliza asked. "What made you think I could help?" Caleb looked at her directly for the first time since they'd sat down. "Because she chose you. In 2 months, she hadn't responded to anyone. Doctors, neighbors, even Mary's sister came from California. Nothing. Then she saw you and something clicked. I don't know what it was, don't care. It worked." "I'm not magic, Caleb." "Never said you were." He stood and refilled his coffee cup. "I just know my daughter ate for the first time in weeks because of you. And I'll take whatever that is for as long as you're willing to give it." Footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Ivy appeared in the doorway, still wearing her coat, her blonde hair falling out of its braid. "Hey, sweetheart," Caleb said softly. "You hungry?" Ivy looked past him to Eliza. Eliza stood slowly. "I could make something, if you've got ingredients." "Pantry's through there," Caleb pointed to a narrow door. "Take whatever you need." The pantry was better stocked than Eliza expected. Flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, canned goods, a sack of potatoes. Someone, probably Mary, had organized it well. Eliza grabbed what she needed and returned to the disaster of a kitchen. She rolled up her sleeves. It took an hour to clean enough space to work properly. Caleb stayed out of her way, taking Ivy into the main room where they sat together on the couch. Eliza could hear him talking to the girl in low tones, not expecting answers, just filling the silence. She made biscuits because they were fast, and because the smell alone could wake the dead. While they baked, she scrambled eggs with butter and salt, fried strips of bacon until they crackled, heated a jar of preserves she found in the pantry. When everything was ready, she called them to the table. Ivy climbed into her chair and waited, her eyes on Eliza. Eliza put a small plate in front of her, 1 biscuit, split open and buttered, with a spoonful of preserves. A few bites of egg, 1 piece of bacon broken into strips. "Just a little," she said. "See how it sits." Ivy picked up the biscuit and took a bite. Caleb's fork clattered against his plate. The girl chewed slowly, swallowed, then took another bite. And another. She ate half the biscuit, a few forkfuls of egg, and 1 strip of bacon before pushing the plate away. It wasn't much. But it was everything. Caleb's hands shook as he set down his coffee cup. His voice broke. He tried again. "Thank you." Eliza cleared the plates without responding. The lump in her throat made it hard to speak anyway. They spent the rest of the afternoon in careful quiet. Caleb went out to tend the animals, and Eliza stayed inside with Ivy, slowly working through the chaos of the kitchen. The girl followed her around like a shadow, not helping, but not leaving either. She'd sit on the floor near wherever Eliza was working, picking at her coat sleeves, occasionally watching with those hollow eyes. Eliza didn't push conversation, just worked steadily, washing dishes, wiping counters, sweeping the floor. At some point she started humming, an old song her mother used to sing, something about rivers and homecoming, and Ivy's head tilted slightly, listening. By evening, the kitchen looked almost normal. Eliza found a pot that wasn't ruined and made stew with the potatoes, carrots, and a bit of salted beef from the pantry. She set the table with mismatched plates and called Caleb in from the barn. They ate together as the light outside faded to blue-gray. Ivy managed a few spoonfuls of stew, soaking her bread in the broth before eating it. Caleb kept glancing at his daughter like he was afraid she'd disappear if he looked away. "This is good," he said. "Real good. It's just stew. First real meal we've had in this house since He stopped himself. "Thank you." Eliza stood and started collecting dishes. "You can stop thanking me." "Don't know if I can." After dinner, Eliza took Ivy upstairs and helped her change into a nightgown. Too big, probably one Mary had made that the girl would grow into. The child climbed into bed without protest, and Eliza tucked the quilts around her. "You want me to stay?" she asked. Ivy's hand shot out and grabbed Eliza's wrist, so Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and waited. She hummed that same song from earlier, her hand resting lightly over Ivy's. Slowly, gradually, the girl's breathing evened out. It took an hour, but Ivy finally fell asleep. Eliza tried to pull her hand away, but Ivy's grip tightened even in sleep. So she stayed, perched on the edge of the mattress, her back aching, watching the child's face smooth out and rest. She thought about her own baby, the one who'd never had a chance to sleep peacefully, whose every breath had been a struggle. She'd sat like this then too, watching, waiting, hoping. The hoping hadn't helped. A soft knock on the doorframe made her turn. Caleb stood in the hallway, his silhouette backlit by the lamp downstairs. "She asleep?" he whispered. Eliza nodded. "You can go. I'll sit with her." "She's holding on." Caleb came closer, saw Ivy's small hand wrapped around Eliza's wrist, and something crossed his face, relief mixed with something else, something that looked like grief. "She used to hold Mary's hand like that," he said quietly. "Wouldn't let go until she was deep asleep. After Mary died, she stopped, slept curled in a ball by herself, wouldn't let me touch her." He sat down in the chair by the window. "I'll take over. You need rest too." Carefully, gently, Eliza worked her wrist free from Ivy's grip. The girl murmured something but didn't wake. Eliza stood, her legs stiff, and moved toward the door. "Eliza," Caleb said. She turned. "I meant what I said earlier. I don't know what you did, but you gave her back to me, even if it's just for a little while. Thank you." Eliza didn't trust herself to respond. She just nodded and left the room. Her own bed felt strange, too soft, too quiet, too empty. She lay in the darkness listening to the house settle, the wind outside, the distant sound of Caleb's voice murmuring to his daughter. The quilt smelled like lavender and cedar, like someone who cared about nice things, like someone who'd had time to care. Eliza pulled it up to her chin and closed her eyes. She didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion dragged her under anyway. She woke to screaming. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The room was pitch black, the bed unfamiliar, and the sound of a child shrieking pulled her straight back to the worst night of her life. The night the baby had stopped breathing, and she'd screamed, and then reality slammed back. Eagle Ridge, Ivy. Eliza stumbled out of bed and ran across the hall. Caleb was already in Ivy's room, trying to hold his thrashing daughter while she fought him with surprising strength for such a small child. Her eyes were open but unseeing, lost in whatever nightmare had her in its grip. "She does this," Caleb said over Ivy's screams. His voice was strained. 2, 3 times a night. I can't. She won't wake up." Eliza pushed forward and knelt beside the bed. "Ivy," she said firmly. "Ivy, look at me." The girl's wild eyes found hers. "You're safe," Eliza said. "You're home. I'm right here." Ivy's screaming cut off mid-breath. She stared at Eliza, her small chest heaving. "That's it," Eliza murmured. "You're safe. I've got you." Ivy lunged forward and buried her face in Eliza's shoulder, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. Eliza wrapped her arms around the child and held on. Over Ivy's head, she met Caleb's eyes. He looked wrecked, pale, exhausted, like a man who'd been fighting a losing battle for so long he'd forgotten what winning looked like. "How long has she been doing this?" Eliza asked quietly. "Since the day Mary died." Eliza rocked slowly, the way she'd rocked her own baby those last desperate hours, and felt Ivy's sobs gradually quiet. The girl didn't let go, just clung harder, her fingers digging into Eliza's nightgown. "I'll stay with her," Eliza said. Caleb hesitated. "You sure?" "Go sleep. You look like death." He flinched at the word but nodded. "If she wakes again, I'll handle it." After he left, Eliza climbed carefully into the bed with Ivy still attached to her, pulling the quilts over both of them. The girl immediately curled against her side, one hand fisted in Eliza's nightgown, the other clutching that same scarf she'd been carrying since the market, the one that must have been Mary's. "Your mama loved you," Eliza whispered into the darkness. "You know that, right?" Ivy didn't answer, but her grip loosened slightly. "My baby died too," Eliza continued, the words coming out before she could stop them. "Long time ago now. Sometimes I still dream about him. Wake up thinking I hear him crying." She swallowed hard. Grief's got a way of sticking around, even when you wish it wouldn't. Ivy's breathing slowed. "But you know what?" Eliza said. "Your mama wouldn't want you to stop living. She'd want you to eat good food and laugh at silly things and grow up strong. That's what mamas want." A small, broken sound came from Ivy's throat. Not quite a word, but close. Eliza held her tighter and started humming again. That same old song over and over until both of them drifted back to sleep. When Eliza woke again, pale dawn light filtered through the window, and Ivy was still pressed against her side, sleeping peacefully for once. Eliza lay still, afraid to move and break whatever spell had settled over the child. The smell of coffee drifted up from downstairs. Carefully, Eliza extracted herself from Ivy's grip and tucked the quilts back around the girl. Then she pulled on her dress from yesterday and went down to the kitchen. Caleb stood at the stove, attempting to make something that might have been porridge but looked more like paste. "Morning," he said without turning. "I heard her wake up last night. Then nothing. You get her settled?" "Eventually." "How?" "Held her. Talked to her." Eliza took over at the stove, scraping the ruined porridge into a bucket. "You want actual food? Step aside." He did, leaning against the counter and watching her work with something like wonder. "You stayed with her all night," he said. "She needed someone." "She needed you." Caleb rubbed his face. "I haven't been able to comfort her in 2 months. She fights me every time. But you—" "I'm not her father. There's no—" Eliza searched for the right word. "No anger. She can't be mad at me for not being Mary." The statement hung in the air between them. "You think she's angry at me?" Caleb asked quietly. "I think she's 6 and her world ended and she's looking for someone to blame." "That's a hell of a thing to carry." "Yeah," Eliza agreed. "It is." She made proper porridge, thick and sweet with brown sugar, and when Ivy came downstairs 20 minutes later, the girl climbed directly onto Eliza's lap instead of sitting in her own chair. Caleb watched them, his expression unreadable. They fell into a rhythm over the next few days. Eliza woke before dawn, started the stove, made breakfast. Ivy ate small amounts, always sitting close to Eliza, never speaking but occasionally making small sounds. Acknowledgments, maybe, or the beginning of words that couldn't quite form. After breakfast, Caleb went out to work the ranch while Eliza cleaned and cooked and slowly brought order back to the house. Ivy followed her everywhere, a silent shadow, sometimes helping in small ways, handing Eliza a dish, picking up a dropped spoon. At night, Ivy slept in Eliza's room, curled against her side, and the nightmares came less frequently. On the 4th day, something shifted. Eliza was in the kitchen kneading dough for bread when Ivy appeared beside her with her small hands held out expectantly. "You want to help?" Eliza asked. Ivy nodded. Eliza tore off a piece of dough and handed it over. "Just push and fold, like this." Ivy copied her movements, her small fingers working the dough with surprising focus. Flour dusted her nose, her braid was coming loose. She looked more like a normal child than Eliza had seen yet. "You're good at this," Eliza said. Ivy glanced up at her, and the ghost of a smile touched her lips. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it was there. Eliza's throat tightened. She turned back to her own dough before the tears could fall. They worked side by side in comfortable silence until Caleb came in from the barn, stomping snow off his boots. "Something smells good," he said. Then he saw Ivy kneading dough beside Eliza and stopped dead. "She's helping," Eliza said quietly. Caleb's face did something complicated, hope and grief fighting for space. He crossed to the table and crouched beside his daughter. "That looks real good, Ivy girl," he said softly. "You making bread with Eliza?" Ivy didn't look at him but nodded once. It was the first direct acknowledgement she'd given her father in 2 months. Caleb stood abruptly and walked outside without a word. Eliza found him 5 minutes later leaning against the side of the house, his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. She stood beside him, not touching, just present. "Sorry," he said roughly. You don't have to apologize." "She's coming back." His voice broke. "I thought she was gone forever, but she's coming back. She's trying." He lowered his hands and looked at Eliza. His eyes were red, his face raw with emotion. "You did that. In 4 days, you did what 2 months of doctors couldn't." "I didn't do anything special." "Stop saying that." There was heat in his voice now. "You moved into a stranger's house, slept in a dead woman's room, held my daughter through nightmares every night, and put this place back together like it matters. That's not nothing." Eliza didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't try. They stood in silence, breath fogging in the cold air, until Caleb spoke again. "You said 1 week. That's what we agreed. What if I asked you to stay longer?" Eliza's heart kicked against her ribs. "Caleb, just hear me out." He turned to face her fully. "Ivy's getting better, but she's not there yet. And the house," he gestured helplessly. "I can't go back to the way it was before you came. I can't watch everything fall apart again." "You want to hire me? As what? A housekeeper?" "As whatever keeps you here." The words sat between them, dangerous and loaded. "People are already talking," Eliza said carefully. "I've been here 4 days, and I guarantee Margaret Finch has already spread it all over Black Hollow. If I stay longer, I don't care what they say." "You should, for Ivy's sake, if not your own." Caleb's jaw tightened. "My daughter is eating, sleeping, almost smiled today. I'm supposed to care more about gossip than that?" "Small towns have long memories, Caleb. You bring scandal on your family, and there's no scandal. You're helping my daughter, that's it." "Is it?" The question hung in the cold air between them. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you know what you're doing." Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. "Because I don't. I came here to help a child. That's all this was supposed to be. And now?" Now, Eliza woke up in the morning and the house smelled like coffee, and there was a little girl who needed her and a man who looked at her like she wasn't invisible. Now she made dinner at a table meant for more than one, and fell asleep to the sound of other people breathing in nearby rooms. Now she felt like maybe she belonged somewhere again, and that terrified her. "Now I don't know," she said honestly. Caleb nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He straightened, brushed snow off his coat. "Stay the week. After that, we'll figure it out." He went back inside, leaving Eliza alone in the cold. She stood there longer than she should have, watching smoke curl from the chimney, listening to the distant sound of Ivy's small voice inside. Not words, but sounds. Attempts at speech that were more than they'd had before. The week was half over. 3.5 days left. Then what? Eliza didn't have an answer. She went back inside where Ivy was pulling fresh bread from the oven with Caleb's help, and tried not to think about leaving. That night, Ivy didn't have nightmares at all. She slept straight through until dawn, peaceful and still, her hand resting lightly on Eliza's arm. In the morning, at breakfast, Ivy spoke her first word. "More." It was barely a whisper, rough from disuse, but it was clear. Eliza nearly dropped the pan she was holding. Caleb's fork clattered onto his plate. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Ivy looked at Eliza and repeated it, stronger this time. "More, please." Eliza set down another biscuit with shaking hands. Ivy picked it up, took a bite, and said clearly, "Thank you." Caleb made a sound like he'd been punched. Eliza had to leave the room before she started crying in front of them both. She stood in the pantry with her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, while behind her she heard Caleb talking to his daughter, asking gentle questions, getting one-word answers, his voice cracking with joy. The child was talking. After 2 months of silence, Ivy was talking. And it was because of what? Bread? Patience? Some trick of timing and luck? Or because a grieving woman and a grieving child had recognized something in each other that no one else could see? When Eliza came back to the kitchen, Caleb looked at her with such raw gratitude that she had to turn away. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't look at me like I hung the moon. I just fed your daughter and held her when she was scared. Anyone could have done it." "But they didn't." Caleb stood cross to her. "You did." They were standing too close. Eliza could smell wood smoke and coffee on him, could see the gray in his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard decisions. "I should start lunch," she said, stepping back. Caleb let her go, but something had shifted, and they both knew it. The remaining days passed in a blur. Ivy spoke more each day, short sentences at first, then longer ones, asking questions about the ranch, the chickens. When could she go outside? Could she help feed the horses? Her nightmares faded to once every few nights, then not at all. She ate 3 meals a day and started putting on weight, color returning to her cheeks. The house transformed under Eliza's hands. Curtains got washed, floors got scrubbed, the stove got cleaned properly for the first time in months. Eliza found Mary's recipe book and baked the same cinnamon cake recipe 3 times until she got it right. And when Ivy ate a piece and said, "Mama used to make this," there were tears, but also smiles. On the last night of the agreed week, Caleb asked Eliza to talk after Ivy was in bed. They sat in the main room with coffee going cold between them. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said. Not a question. That was the arrangement. "I want you to stay." Eliza had been expecting this, had practiced her response. But sitting across from him in the lamplight, seeing the hope and fear fighting for space on his face, all her prepared words disappeared. "I can't," she said. "Why not?" "Because—" She stopped, started again. "Because this isn't my life. This is your home, your daughter. I was just helping temporarily. What if I don't want it to be temporary?" "Caleb, listen to me." He leaned forward. "I know what this looks like. Widower hires a woman to help, gets dependent, asks her to stay. I know how that sounds, but this isn't—" He struggled for words. "You fit here. Ivy needs you. The ranch needs you. He stopped himself. Eliza's heart pounded. "You what?" "I need you," he said quietly. "Not as a housekeeper. Not as help. As—" He met her eyes. "I don't know what this is between us. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm just a lonely man who's forgotten what normal feels like. But these past 7 days have been the first time since Mary died that I didn't want to go to bed just to make the day end. And I think maybe you feel it too." Eliza couldn't breathe, because he was right. She'd felt it in the small moments, passing him coffee in the morning, their hands brushing, sitting across from each other at dinner while Ivy chattered between them, working side by side in comfortable silence, coming down the stairs and seeing him reading to Ivy by the fire, his deep voice gentle with his daughter. She'd felt it and been terrified by it. "I can't be her mother," Eliza said. "That's not— I can't replace Mary." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" Caleb stood, paced to the window, looked out at the snow-covered valley. "I'm asking you to stay. Keep helping Ivy. He turned back to her. "Keep making this feel like a home instead of a tomb. That's all. I won't push for more unless you want it. People will talk. Let them." "Caleb, you have no idea what small-town gossip can do. It'll poison everything. They'll make Ivy's life miserable just to punish you for whatever they think is happening here. So we give them nothing to talk about." His voice was firm now. "We do this properly. You stay as hired help. I pay you fair wages. We keep separate rooms, everything above board. They can whisper all they want, but there won't be anything to actually find." Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to explain that it wouldn't matter, that people like Margaret Finch didn't need facts to destroy reputations. But looking at his face, at the hope there, fragile and desperate, she couldn't do it. 2 more weeks, she heard herself say, to get Ivy more stable. After that, we reevaluate. Caleb's shoulders sagged with relief. 2 weeks. Thank you. But I need my own money. Whatever you're paying, put it aside. I won't be dependent. Whatever you want. And if the gossip gets too bad, I'm gone. I won't let Ivy suffer because of me." Agreed. They shook on it, formal and awkward, and Eliza went upstairs to bed feeling like she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. In her room, Mary's old sewing room, she lay under the star quilt and stared at the ceiling. 2 more weeks. She could do 2 more weeks. Then she'd go back to Black Hollow and her cold room above the feed store and her empty life, and this would just be a strange interlude she'd remember on lonely nights. That was the plan, but as Eliza finally drifted off to sleep, Ivy's soft breathing coming from the cot they'd moved into the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that some plans were meant to be broken. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the valley in fresh white, erasing all the tracks that had come before. The 2 weeks became 3, then 4, and before Eliza realized it, January had bled into February, and she was still at the Mercer Ranch. The arrangement worked, mostly. She had her own room, her own wages tucked away in the wooden box on her dresser, and enough distance from Caleb that no one could claim impropriety. At least not with any proof. That didn't stop them from trying. The first visitors arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into Eliza's extended stay. Eliza was in the kitchen teaching Ivy how to crack eggs without getting shell in the bowl when she heard the wagon pull up outside. Through the window, she recognized the passengers immediately. Margaret Finch, flanked by 2 other women from town, Sarah Hendricks, the minister's wife, and Clara Morton, whose husband owned the lumber mill. The 3 horsemen of respectability, Caleb had once called them, back when his wife was alive, and they'd show up uninvited to inspect Mary's housekeeping. Eliza's stomach dropped. "Go find your papa," she told Ivy quietly. "Tell him we have company." The girl ran off toward the barn while Eliza wiped her hands on her apron and tried to steady her breathing. She knew this was coming, had known it since the day she agreed to stay. But knowing didn't make it easier. The knock on the door was sharp, imperious. Eliza opened it to 3 faces arranged in identical expressions of righteous disapproval. "Mrs. Boone," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What a surprise to find you still here." "Mrs. Finch." Eliza didn't move from the doorway. "Can I help you?" "We've come to speak with Mr. Mercer." Sarah Hendricks peered around Eliza into the house. "Is he available?" "He's working. I can get him if it's urgent." "Oh, it's urgent." Clara Morton's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very urgent indeed." Caleb appeared then, Ivy's hand in his expression already hardening as he took in their visitors. "Ladies," he said curtly, "this is unexpected. We need to speak with you." Margaret's eyes flicked to Eliza, then back. "Privately." "Anything you need to say can be said in front of Eliza." "Caleb," Sarah's voice took on a pleading tone. "Please, for your own sake." He hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. Come in." Eliza started to retreat to the kitchen, but Caleb caught her arm. "Stay," he said quietly. "This concerns you." The 5 adults arranged themselves in the main room, the 3 women on the couch, Caleb in his chair, Eliza standing awkwardly near the door. Ivy had disappeared upstairs, sensing the tension. Margaret wasted no time. "Caleb, we're here out of concern. For you, for Ivy, for your family's reputation." "My reputation is fine." "Is it?" Clara leaned forward. "The whole town is talking about you keeping a woman in your house. An unmarried woman, alone with you and your daughter, no chaperone, no—" "Eliza is helping with Ivy," Caleb interrupted. "That's all." "That's all?" Margaret's laugh was cold. "Caleb, you're not a stupid man. You know how this looks." "I know how it is, which is different from how it looks. People are saying—" Sarah stopped herself, glanced at Eliza. "They're saying things, cruel things, about both of you. Let them talk." "It's not just talk." Margaret's voice rose. "Your daughter is already damaged goods because of her mother's death. Do you want to make it worse by associating her with this kind of scandal?" The words hit like a slap. Damaged goods. As if Ivy were a broken toy instead of a grieving child. Eliza felt rage build in her chest, hot and sharp. "I think you should leave," Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We're trying to help you," Clara insisted. "If you'd just send Mrs. Boone back to town, give it a few months for the gossip to die down." "Eliza stays." "Why?" Margaret stood abruptly. "What possible reason could you have for keeping her here that isn't—" She stopped, her eyes widening with fake realization. Oh, oh, I see. It's already happened, hasn't it? Nothing has happened, Caleb said through gritted teeth. Then prove it. Send her away. Today, now, before you ruin whatever reputation you have left. Eliza found her voice. Mrs. Finch, with all due respect, I'm not talking to you. Margaret turned on her with venom. You've insinuated yourself into a vulnerable man's home, taking advantage of his grief and his daughter's illness to secure yourself a comfortable situation. It's despicable. That's enough. Caleb stood, his hands clenched into fists. Get out. Caleb, please, Sarah tried. Out! Now! Before I forget I'm supposed to be a gentleman. The three women rose in a rustle of skirts and wounded dignity. Margaret paused at the door, turning back one last time. You're making a mistake, she said coldly. And when you realize it, don't expect the town to welcome you back with open arms. You've made your choice. Live with it. They left in a cloud of righteous fury, their wagon kicking up frozen mud as it rattled back down the mountain road. Caleb stood at the window, watching them go, his jaw working. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly. Don't apologize for them. I should go. They're right. My being here is causing problems. He turned to face her. Do you want to go? The question hung between them. Did she? The rational part of Eliza's mind screamed yes. Leave now, before this got worse, before the scandal touched Ivy, before she got any more attached to this place and these people. But the other part, the part that had felt dead for 2 years, whispered something different. No, she admitted, I don't. Then you're staying. Caleb, you heard them. They'll destroy your reputation, Ivy's reputation. You can't just... Yes, I can. He crossed to her and they stood too close again, the air between them charged with something neither wanted to name. I buried my wife 4 months ago. I almost lost my daughter. I spent weeks watching her waste away, praying for any sign she'd come back. Then you showed up and she started eating, started talking, started being a child again. His voice was rough. So no, I don't care what Margaret Finch thinks. I don't care what the whole damn town thinks. You stay until Ivy doesn't need you anymore. And when will that be? The question was quiet, but it carried weight. Caleb didn't answer. Footsteps on the stairs broke the tension. Ivy appeared, her face worried. Are the mean ladies gone? She asked, her voice still small and uncertain. Caleb crouched down to her level. They're gone, sweetheart. Why were they mad at Eliza? They weren't mad at her, they just... He struggled. They don't understand. Understand what? That sometimes people need help, and it's okay to accept it. Ivy considered this, then walked over to Eliza and took her hand. I like having Eliza here, she said simply. She makes good pancakes, and she doesn't cry all the time like Papa used to. Caleb flinched. Eliza squeezed Ivy's hand. I like being here too, sweetheart. Then you'll stay? For a while longer, yes. Good. Ivy's face brightened. Can we make cookies? After lunch. The girl ran back upstairs, crisis forgotten in the resilience of childhood. Caleb stood slowly. She's not wrong. About the crying. You were grieving. I still am. He looked at her. But it's different now. Less... He searched for the word. Less like drowning. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They went back to their separate corners of the house, maintaining the careful distance that kept things proper, and tried to ignore the fact that every day it got harder. But Margaret's visit was just the beginning. The next Sunday, Caleb decided to take Ivy into town for supplies. Eliza stayed behind, claiming the house needed cleaning, but really she just didn't want to face the stares and whispers. She spent the morning scrubbing floors she'd already scrubbed twice, trying not to think about what people were saying. They returned 3 hours later. Ivy was crying. Eliza dropped her washcloth and hurried to the door. What happened? Caleb's face was granite. Get her inside. Ivy ran to Eliza and buried her face in her skirts, her small body shaking with sobs. Ivy, honey, what's wrong? Eliza knelt down, trying to see the girl's face. They said, Ivy hiccuped, they said I shouldn't talk to Jenny anymore because I live with a bad woman and it might rub off. The air left Eliza's lungs. Who said that? Jenny's mama. Ivy looked up, her face streaked with tears. Is Eliza bad? She doesn't seem bad. Eliza's not bad, Caleb said harshly. Mrs. Patterson is ignorant and mean, and you don't need to listen to her. But Jenny can't play with me anymore. She said so. And Tommy called you a... Ivy looked at Eliza, confused. What's a floozy? Eliza's hand shook. She forced them still. It's a mean word people use when they don't understand something, she said carefully. It doesn't mean anything true. So I can still be friends with Jenny? I don't know, sweetheart. Ivy's face crumpled again. It's not fair. I just got friends back, and now they're gone again. She ran upstairs, her footsteps heavy, and slammed the door to her room. Eliza stood slowly. I need to pack. No. Caleb, they called your daughter. They said those things to a 6-year-old child. I can't. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is, her voice cracked. I knew this would happen. I told you it would happen. And I stayed anyway because I was selfish, and now Ivy's paying the price. Caleb grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. Those people, they're looking for someone to kick. It doesn't matter if it's you or me or anyone else who doesn't fit their narrow view of acceptable. They'll always find a target. But it doesn't have to be Ivy. Ivy is stronger than you think. She survived losing her mother. She'll survive this. Will she? Eliza pulled away from him. Or will she grow up hearing whispers about the woman her father kept in the house? Will she be shunned and mocked and excluded because of me? Because of them, Caleb corrected. Not you. Them. The difference doesn't matter to a 6-year-old who just lost her best friend. She went upstairs to pack, ignoring Caleb's protests. But when she passed Ivy's room, she heard crying, deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of more than just lost friendships. The sound of a child who'd been hurt too many times and didn't understand why the world kept being cruel. Eliza stopped at the door, knocked softly. Go away. Ivy's voice was muffled. It's me. Can I come in? Silence. Then, I guess? Eliza opened the door. Ivy lay on her bed, face buried in her pillow, Mary's scarf clutched in one hand. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. It's not your fault. Your papa said the same thing. But it feels like my fault. Ivy rolled over, her face blotchy and tear-stained. Are you leaving? I think maybe I should. Because of what they said? Because I don't want you to be hurt anymore. Ivy sat up abruptly. But if you leave, I'll be hurt anyway. Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. Everyone leaves. Mama left. My friends left. Now you're leaving too. Why does everyone always leave? The word stabbed through Eliza's chest. Oh, sweetheart, I don't want you to go. Ivy was crying again, desperate tears. I know people are mean and say bad things, but I don't care. You make Papa smile again. You make the house not scary. You... She hiccuped. You stayed when Mama couldn't. Eliza pulled the girl into her arms and held on tight. I'm not your Mama, Ivy. I can't replace her. I know. Ivy's voice was small against her shoulder. But you're here, and that's better than nobody. They sat like that for a long time, Eliza rocking the sobbing child, until Ivy finally cried herself out and fell asleep in her arms. Eliza laid her gently on the bed, covered her with the quilt, and went back downstairs. Caleb was in the kitchen, staring at nothing. She asleep? He asked without looking up. Finally. You still planning to leave? Eliza pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. I don't know. She asked me to stay, but staying means she keeps getting hurt. And leaving means she loses someone else she loves. Caleb finally looked at her. There's no good answer here, Eliza. Either way, someone suffers. Then what do? We stop hiding, stop acting like we've done something wrong. He leaned forward, his expression fierce. We go into town, together, all three of us. We walk through that market with our heads up and dare anyone to say something to our faces instead of behind our backs. That's a terrible idea, probably, but I'm tired of letting them control us. Tired of my daughter crying because other children aren't allowed to play with her. Tired of pretending I'm ashamed when I'm not. Caleb, I'm not ashamed of you being here, he said firmly. I'm grateful. And if that makes me a scandal, then so be it. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this could go wrong, all the damage it could do. But looking at his face, at the determination there, mixed with exhaustion and something that looked like hope, she found she couldn't. "One trip to town," she said. "We see how it goes. If it makes things worse, it won't. If it does," she continued, "I'm gone. No arguments. Deal." They shook on it, and Eliza tried to ignore the feeling that they'd just agreed to walk into a firing squad. The next Saturday, they loaded the wagon and headed to Black Hollow. Ivy sat between them, nervous but trying to be brave. Eliza wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and kept her hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. The market was crowded, as always. They'd barely stepped out of the wagon when heads turned. The whispers started immediately. Caleb took Ivy's hand on one side. Then, deliberately, he offered his other arm to Eliza. She stared at it like it was a snake. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She took his arm. They walked through the market like that, a united front, refusing to skulk or hide. People stared. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Margaret Finch stood by the fabric merchant's stall with her mouth hanging open. Caleb stopped at the dry goods store. "Morning, Bill." The shopkeeper looked uncomfortable. "Caleb, Mrs. Boone. Need to stock up. Eliza's making her pot roast next week, and we're low on potatoes." Bill's eyes darted between them. "Right. How many pounds you need?" They went through the transaction like it was normal, like they weren't the center of every conversation in a 50-foot radius. At the butcher's, Caleb did the same thing. Introduced Eliza. Mentioned her cooking. Made it clear she was a fixture at the ranch, not a dirty secret. Some people looked away. Others whispered louder. But a few, not many, but a few, nodded politely. Said good morning. Acted like human beings instead of vultures. They were loading supplies into the wagon when Sarah Hendricks approached, her face pinched with worry. "Caleb, might I have a word?" "You can say whatever you need to say in front of Eliza." Sarah glanced at Eliza, then back to Caleb. I wanted you to know that my husband is planning to address this situation from the pulpit tomorrow. He's concerned about the moral example being set for the children." "The moral example?" Caleb's voice was flat. "Tell your husband that my daughter was starving herself to death, and Eliza saved her life. If he has a problem with that, he can take it up with his maker." Sarah flinched. "He's just trying to do what's right." "So am I." She left, shaking her head. They finished loading in tense silence. Ivy had been brave through most of it, but now she looked small and scared. "Papa," she said quietly, "can we go home?" "Yeah, sweetheart. We can go home." They climbed into the wagon and started back up the mountain road. None of them spoke. The weight of all those stairs, all that judgment, sat heavy in the air between them. They were halfway home when Ivy said, "I'm glad you stayed, Eliza." Eliza looked down at the girl. "Even though people are mean?" "Especially because people are mean." Ivy's face was serious, older than her years. "Mama used to say that mean people need nice people around to remind them how to act. Maybe we're reminding them." Out of the mouths of children. Caleb's hand found Eliza's on the wagon bench, just for a moment, a brief squeeze of solidarity, then returned to the reins. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it felt different now. Less like defeat, more like determination. The next week brought more visitors, but these weren't church ladies. They were ranchers, men Caleb had done business with for years. They came one at a time, usually around dinner, ostensibly to discuss cattle prices or trading goods. But Eliza saw the way they looked at the house, at her, at Ivy playing happily in the kitchen. They were checking up on him, making sure he hadn't lost his mind. Most left satisfied that nothing improper was happening. But a few remained skeptical, their eyes hard with judgment. Tom Patterson, Jenny's father, showed up on a Thursday evening. "Got some concerns, Caleb," he said without preamble. "I figured." They stood on the porch, the cold air sharp between them. Inside, Eliza kept Ivy distracted with dough shaping, but she could hear every word through the open window. "Your business is your business," Tom continued, "but when it starts affecting other families, how is my household affecting you?" My daughter came home crying because Ivy said some things. About living arrangements, about... He stopped. "Look, I'm not judging, but I can't have Jenny exposed to..." "To what?" A woman who cooks and cleans and takes care of a child? That's what you're protecting Jenny from? You know what I mean. No, I don't. Explain it to me. Tom shifted uncomfortably. There's talk about what you and Mrs. Boone are, about the nature of her employment. The nature is that my daughter was dying and Eliza helped her. That's it. Is it? The question hung there, loaded and dangerous. Yes, Caleb said firmly. It is. Tom looked at him for a long moment. All right, if you say so. But Caleb, appearances matter, especially for kids. You might want to think about how this looks to Ivy as she gets older. He left. Caleb came back inside, his face dark. Papa? Ivy looked up from her dough. Is Jenny still mad at me? No, sweetheart, she's not mad. Her parents are just confused. About what? About things that don't concern them. Ivy went back to her dough, satisfied with that answer. But Eliza saw the tension in Caleb's shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. That night, after Ivy was asleep, they sat by the fire in loaded silence. Maybe they're right, Eliza said finally. Don't. Not about anything improper, but about appearances. About what this is teaching Ivy. What's it teaching her? That adults can help each other? That kindness exists? That her father keeps an unmarried woman in his house and doesn't care what anyone thinks? I don't care what they think. You should. Eliza stood, pacing. Ivy's going to grow up in this town. She'll need these people. Their approval, their acceptance. If this continues, we're handicapping her future. Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. What if we gave them nothing to talk about? We're trying that. It's not working. No, I mean, he stood, faced her. What if we made this legitimate? Eliza's heart stopped. What? Marry me. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Eliza couldn't breathe. You can't be serious. Why not? It solves everything. You'd have a legitimate place here. Ivy would have... He stopped. We'd be a family, a real one. Legal and proper, and nobody could say anything. Caleb, you don't just marry someone to stop gossip. It's not just about the gossip. Then what's it about? He looked at her, and something in his expression made her chest tight. It's about the fact that I wake up every morning, and the first thing I think about is whether you're still here. It's about how the house feels empty when you're in town for supplies. It's about... He stopped, started again. Mary's been gone 4 months, and I know that's not long enough. I know people will say I'm rushing, but she's not coming back. And I'm tired of living in a tomb waiting for permission to keep breathing. You barely know me. I know you saved my daughter's life. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you hum when you cook and you cry when you think nobody's listening and you look at Ivy like she matters. His voice was rough. That's enough. It's not enough for marriage. Then what is? Eliza didn't have an answer. I'm not asking you to love me, Caleb continued. I'm asking you to build something with me. A partnership. For Ivy's sake and maybe for ours too. This is insane, probably. People will say you're taking advantage, that I trapped you. Let them say it. Caleb, think about it. He stepped closer. Just think about it. Don't answer now, but consider that maybe this could work. Maybe we could make something good out of all this mess. He left her standing by the fire, her mind spinning. Eliza climbed the stairs to her room in a daze. Ivy was asleep in the small bed they'd moved in, her breathing soft and even. Marry Caleb Mercer. Become Ivy's stepmother. Make this strange, temporary arrangement permanent. It was the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard. And yet... Eliza lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself imagine a future that wasn't just survival, a real home, a real family, a child who needed her, and a man who what? Tolerated her? Appreciated her? More? She didn't know, and not knowing terrified her more than anything else. 3 days passed, and Eliza didn't give Caleb an answer. She couldn't. Every time she opened her mouth to say yes or no, the words stuck in her throat like fish bones. During the day, she kept busy, cooking, cleaning, teaching Ivy her letters. At night, she lay awake listening to the house settle and tried to imagine what marriage would mean. Not the fantasy version with romance and declarations, but the real thing. Sharing a life with a man she barely knew. Stepping into a dead woman's shoes. Becoming a mother to a child who'd already lost one. It was too much. It wasn't enough. She couldn't sort out which was which. On the fourth morning, she woke to find Ivy standing beside her bed, staring at her with those unsettling blue eyes. "You're leaving," the girl said. Not a question. Eliza sat up, groggy. "What makes you say that?" "You have that look. Like you're already gone even though you're still here." Ivy's voice was flat, resigned. "Mama had it too. Before she died." The statement hit like a slap. "Ivy, I'm not... Your mama was sick. That's different." "Is it?" The girl climbed onto the bed, sitting cross-legged. "She kept saying she was fine, but I could tell she was leaving. And now you're doing it too." Eliza reached for Ivy's hand, but the girl pulled back. "Everyone leaves," Ivy said matter-of-factly. "That's just how it works." "That's not true." "Yes, it is. Mama left. Jenny left. Tommy doesn't talk to me anymore. Now you're going to leave and Papa's going to cry again, and everything will go back to being sad all the time. Your Papa asked me to stay." Ivy looked at her sharply. "He did?" "He did." "Then why are you thinking about leaving?" Eliza struggled for an answer that a 6-year-old would understand. Because staying means things would change. Big things. And change is scary. "Mama dying was scary," Ivy said. "You leaving would be scary. You staying sounds pretty good compared to that." Out of the mouths of children, again. Eliza pulled Ivy into a hug, and this time the girl allowed it. She felt so small, so fragile, like something that could break if you held it wrong. "I'm scared too," Eliza admitted quietly. "Scared I won't be good enough. Scared I'll mess it up. Scared that..." She stopped. "Scared Papa doesn't really want you. He just needs someone?" Ivy said into her shoulder. Eliza went still. "How did you eat?" "I'm 6, not stupid." Ivy pulled back to look at her. "But I don't think that's true. Papa looks at you the way he used to look at Mama, when he thought she wasn't watching, like you're..." She struggled for the word. "Important." "Ivy, and you look at him the same way. I see it." Eliza's face heated. We're not..." "It's okay if you like him," Ivy said seriously. "Mama would want him to be happy. She told me that right before. She said Papa might be sad for a while, but someday he'd find happy again, and I should help him when he did." Eliza's throat closed up completely. "Do you make Papa happy?" Ivy asked. "I don't know." "I think you do, and you make me happy too. So maybe you should stay." Simple as that. No complications, no overthinking, just stay. If only it were that easy. They went downstairs together. Caleb was already up, making coffee that would probably be terrible. He looked at Eliza, a question in his eyes, but she shook her head minutely. Not yet. She still didn't have an answer. He nodded and turned back to the stove. The morning passed in tense domesticity. Eliza made breakfast while Caleb went out to feed the animals. Ivy sat at the table drawing pictures. A house, a stick figure family, a sun that took up half the page. When Caleb came back in, stamping snow off his boots, Ivy held up the drawing. "Look, that's us, that's you, that's me, and that's Eliza." Caleb studied the picture. In it, the 3 figures stood in front of the house holding hands. All of them were smiling. "That's real nice, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough. "Can we keep her?" Ivy asked. "Please?" Caleb's eyes found Eliza's across the room. "That's not up to me." "Then, Eliza, can we keep you?" The simple question, asked with such hope, nearly broke Eliza's composure. "I'm not a stray dog, Ivy." "I know, but can you stay anyway?" Before Eliza could answer, hoofbeats sounded outside. Multiple horses, coming fast. Caleb's expression darkened. He crossed to the window and looked out, then swore under his breath. "What is it?" Eliza asked. "Town council, 3 of them." He turned to her. "Take Ivy upstairs." "Caleb, please, I don't want her hearing this." Eliza took Ivy's hand and led her up to her room, but she left the door cracked open. She could hear voices downstairs, muffled but angry. Ivy pressed against her side. Are they mad at Papa? I don't know, honey. But she did know. Of course they were mad. The whole town was mad. And now the council had come to do something about it. The voices grew louder, and Eliza couldn't help but listen. Completely inappropriate arrangement. That was Robert Dawson, who owned the big ranch south of town. Thinking of the child, James Fletcher, the banker. Reputation of this entire community, she didn't recognize that voice. Then Caleb, loud and clear. My daughter was dying. Eliza saved her. End of discussion. It's not the end, Dawson shot back. You've got an unmarried woman living in your house, Mercer. That's not acceptable. Since when do you get to decide what's acceptable in my house? Since your behavior started affecting the whole town. We've got families pulling their children out of school because they don't want them around Ivy. We've got the minister refusing to conduct services unless this situation is resolved. This isn't just about you anymore. Silence. Then Caleb's voice, dangerously quiet. Families are doing what? Keeping their kids away from yours, Fletcher said, slightly less hostile than Dawson. Look, Caleb, nobody's questioning your motives, but you have to see how this looks. A man alone with a woman who's not his wife. She's helping with my daughter. Then hire an older woman, someone proper. Hell, get your sister to come stay for a while, but this, Dawson again, this needs to end today. And if I refuse, then we'll have to take official action. What kind of action? A pause. Then the unfamiliar voice spoke. There are concerns about Ivy's welfare, about whether this household is a suitable environment for raising a child. Eliza's blood ran cold. Beside her, Ivy whispered, What does that mean? Shh. Listen. You're threatening to take my daughter? Caleb's voice was lethal now. Nobody wants that, Fletcher said quickly. But if you refuse to remedy this situation, get out. Caleb, get the hell out of my house. Footsteps. The front door opening. You have 1 week, Dawson called back. Either Mrs. Boone goes or we file a formal complaint with the territorial court. Your choice. The door slammed. Eliza heard Caleb pacing below, heard him hit something, the wall maybe, with enough force to shake the house. Then silence. She waited a few minutes before going downstairs. Ivy stayed in her room, somehow understanding that the adults needed to talk. Caleb stood by the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. How much did you hear? He asked without turning. Enough. They're serious. They'll take her. Can they do that? Territorial law gives the court wide discretion in cases of... He stopped, his voice breaking. In cases where a child's moral welfare is at risk. This is insane. This is Black Hollow. He turned to face her, and the desperation in his expression gutted her. They'll destroy us. Take Ivy, put her with some respectable family, and I'll never... He couldn't finish. Eliza crossed to him slowly. What do you want to do? I want to tell them all to go to hell and keep living my life. But I can't. Not if it means losing Ivy. So I leave. No. Caleb, if me being here is what's causing... It's not you. It's them and their narrow minds and their need to control everyone around them. His hands clenched into fists. I won't let them win. Then what's the alternative? He looked at her for a long moment. I asked you to marry me. That offer still stands. Eliza's heart hammered. You're talking about getting married despite the town council? I'm talking about getting married so they have no legal ground to stand on. So you have every right to be here, and Ivy has a mother on record, and nobody can say a damn thing about it. That's not a reason to get married. It's not the only reason. He stepped closer. Eliza, I know this isn't romantic. This isn't how it's supposed to happen, but we're out of options. In 1 week, either you're gone or they take Ivy, unless we give them what they want. Respectability. Yes. She turned away, her mind racing. Marriage. Legal and binding and permanent. To a man she'd known for barely 2 months. A man who was proposing out of desperation rather than love. But also a man who'd defended her to the town. Who'd stood beside her in the market. Who looked at her like she mattered. And there was Ivy. Sweet broken Ivy who'd finally started healing. who slept through the night now, who smiled and laughed and was learning to be a child again. If Eliza left, the girl would shatter. If the town took her, she'd be destroyed. Would it be real? Eliza asked quietly. The marriage, or just for show? Caleb was quiet for a long time. That would be up to you. What do you want it to be? He stopped, started again. I want a partner, someone to build a life with, someone who will help me raise Ivy and run this ranch and be there when I wake up in the morning. Maybe that grows into something more. Maybe it doesn't. But either way, it's real. It matters. Eliza turned back to him. This is crazy. Probably. We barely know each other. I know enough. People will say I trapped you, that I manipulated this whole situation to secure myself a husband. Let them say it. I'll know the truth. She studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the exhaustion that seemed permanently etched into his features. He was offering her everything she'd lost when Daniel died. A home, a family, a future. It wouldn't be the same. Could never be the same. But maybe it could be something. If I say yes, she said slowly, I need you to understand something. I won't be Mary. I can't cook like her, or clean like her, or be the wife she was. I'm going to do things differently, make mistakes, probably disappoint you. I'm not asking you to be Mary. And Ivy, I'll love her as best I can, but I'm not her mother. She needs to remember Mary, honor her. I won't try to replace that. I wouldn't want you to. And if this doesn't work, if we try this and it's a disaster, you can't blame me for leaving. Something flickered in his expression. If you leave, it won't be because I didn't fight to keep you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Eliza took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Okay. Caleb blinked. Okay? Okay, I'll marry you, but she held up a hand, on one condition. Name it. We tell Ivy the truth. Not some fairy tale about how we fell in love, the truth. That we're doing this to keep her safe, and because we want to build a family together. She deserves honesty. Caleb nodded. Agreed. They stood there awkwardly, two people who'd just agreed to spend their lives together and had no idea what to do next. Do people shake hands on this? Eliza asked. Despite everything, Caleb laughed. It was a rough sound, half relief and half hysteria, but genuine. I have no idea, he admitted. They settled for a brief, awkward hug that felt more like a business agreement than an engagement. When they pulled apart, Caleb said, We should tell Ivy. Now? Before I lose my nerve. They climbed the stairs together and found Ivy sitting on her bed, still clutching that drawing of the three of them. Is everything okay? She asked nervously. Caleb sat down beside her. Eliza stood in the doorway, unsure of her place. Sweetheart, we need to talk to you about something, Caleb began. Ivy's face crumpled. Eliza's leaving, isn't she? No, actually, he glanced at Eliza, who nodded. Actually, she's staying, for good. Ivy's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Because, he took a breath, because Eliza and I are going to get married. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Ivy launched herself at Eliza with enough force to nearly knock her over. You're staying, the girl shrieked. You're staying forever. Eliza caught her, staggering slightly. Ivy, honey, we need to explain. You're going to be my mama. Not exactly. I can call you mama, right? Or do I have to call you Eliza? Can I call you both? Will you read to me at night like mama used to? Will you? Ivy, breathe, Caleb said, but he was smiling despite everything. The girl finally calmed down enough to listen. Eliza knelt so they were eye level. I want you to understand something, she said gently. Your real mama was Mary. She loved you more than anything, and nothing that happens now changes that. Ivy's face fell slightly. But you're marrying Papa. I am, and that means I'll be your stepmother. I'll take care of you and love you as best I can. But your mama, Mary, she'll always be your mama. You don't have to choose. Can I love you both? Eliza's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. You can love us both. Ivy thought about this, her small face serious. Then she threw her arms around Eliza's neck. Okay, she whispered. I can do that. Over the girl's head, Eliza met Caleb's eyes. He looked wrecked and relieved and terrified all at once. They'd just agreed to get married in less than a week to stop the town from tearing them apart. It was the most insane thing Eliza had ever done. And yet, holding Ivy close while Caleb watched them with something that looked almost like hope, she thought maybe, just maybe, it might work. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Caleb rode into town alone to file the marriage license, coming back with a grim expression and news that the whole place was buzzing about it. They think you trapped me, he said flatly. I know. Margaret Finch actually congratulated me on doing the right thing. His lip curled. Like I'm some idiot who got himself into trouble and needs managing. Does it matter what they think? No, but it's still infuriating. Eliza had nothing to wear for a wedding, so she took apart her best dress and remade it with fabric from Mary's sewing supplies. It felt wrong somehow, using a dead woman's things to marry her husband, but Caleb insisted Mary would have wanted it, and Eliza didn't have better options. She worked by lamplight, her stitches uneven from nerves, while Ivy helped by threading needles and asking 1,000 questions. Will you wear a veil? No, honey, this isn't that kind of wedding. Will there be cake? Maybe, if I have time to bake one. Will you kiss Papa? Eliza's hand stilled on the fabric. I don't know. Mama and Papa kissed all the time, even when they thought I wasn't looking. Well, your Papa and we're different. How? How to explain a marriage of necessity to a 6-year-old? How to describe two broken people trying to build something functional out of grief and desperation? We're still figuring things out, Eliza said finally. Sometimes adults don't have all the answers right away. Oh. Ivy went back to her needle threading. That's okay. You can figure it out after the wedding. If only it were that simple. The night before the wedding, Eliza couldn't sleep. She paced her room, then went downstairs for water, then paced some more. Around midnight, she heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to find Caleb in the doorway. Can't sleep either? He asked. Apparently not. He crossed to the kitchen table and sat down. After a moment, Eliza joined him. They sat in silence, both staring at nothing. Are we making a mistake? Eliza asked finally. Probably. That's not reassuring. Would you rather I lie? Maybe. Caleb laughed quietly. Look, I don't know if this is a mistake. All I know is that every other option feels worse. So we try this, and if it doesn't work... He stopped. If it doesn't work, then what? Then we deal with it. Together. Because tomorrow you'll be my wife. And that means... He struggled for words. That means you're not alone anymore. Neither of us are. Eliza looked at him in the dim lamplight. This man who was offering her partnership instead of romance, honesty instead of pretty lies. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. What if I'm a terrible wife? What if I'm a terrible husband? You were married before. You know how it works. I was married to Mary. I have no idea how to be married to you. The statement shouldn't have been comforting, but somehow it was. They were both walking into this blind, figuring it out as they went. Can I ask you something? Eliza said. Anything. Do you still love her? Mary? Caleb was quiet for a long time. Yes, but it's different now, like loving a memory instead of a person. She's been gone 4 months, and already I can't remember what her voice sounded like. That terrifies me. He looked at Eliza. But it also means I can move forward, not forget her, but make space for something new. And you think I'm that something new? I think you could be, if we both try. They sat there a while longer, the house creaking around them, tomorrow looming large and frightening. Finally, Caleb stood. We should sleep. Big day tomorrow. Yeah. He paused at the doorway. Eliza? Yeah? Thank you. For saying yes. For staying. For everything. She nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, Eliza stayed at the table. Tomorrow she'd become Eliza Mercer. Tomorrow she'd stand in front of the minister and the town and promise to love and honor a man she barely knew. Tomorrow her whole life would change. She thought about Daniel, about the love they'd had, young and passionate and full of dreams. This thing with Caleb wasn't that. Could never be that. But maybe it could be something different, something solid and real, built on mutual need and shared responsibility and the slow accumulation of ordinary moments. Maybe that was enough. She went back to bed and somehow, miraculously, slept. The wedding was set for noon at the small church in Black Hollow. Eliza woke early and bathed in cold water, then dressed in her remade dress. It wasn't beautiful, but it was clean and well-fitted and would have to do. Ivy burst into the room, already dressed in her Sunday best. "You look pretty," she exclaimed. "Thank you, honey. Are you nervous?" "Very." "Don't be. Papa's nervous too. I heard him puking in the outhouse this morning." "Ivy!" "What?" He was. Despite her nerves, Eliza laughed. They rode to town in tense silence, the three of them crammed onto the wagon bench. Black Hollow looked the same as always, muddy streets, weathered buildings, people going about their business. But everything felt different now. The church was small, plain, and packed. Apparently half the town had shown up to witness this train wreck. Eliza's stomach churned as they walked up the steps. Caleb took her arm, steadying her, and she was grateful for the support. Inside, faces turned to stare. Margaret Finch sat in the front row with a pinched expression. Sarah Hendricks looked vaguely sympathetic. Most others just seemed curious, waiting to see if Eliza would actually go through with it. The minister, a thin man with disapproving eyes, waited at the altar. They walked down the aisle together, Caleb on one side, Ivy on the other, running a gauntlet of judgment. The ceremony was brief and perfunctory. The minister clearly disapproved but was legally obligated to perform the service. He raced through the vows like he wanted it over with as quickly as possible. "Do you, Caleb James Mercer, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Eliza May Boone, take this man?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you man and wife." A pause. "You may kiss the bride." Eliza and Caleb turned to each other awkwardly. They hadn't discussed this part. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was brief, chaste, more a pressing of lips than anything passionate. But when they pulled apart, something had shifted. They were married now, legally bound, for better or worse. The church erupted in polite applause that felt more obligatory than celebratory. Ivy threw her arms around both of them. "We're a family now," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. And just like that, it was done. They signed the papers in the minister's office while Ivy swung her legs from a chair and hummed to herself. Eliza's hand shook as she wrote her new name for the first time, Eliza Mercer. Outside, a few people stopped to offer congratulations that ranged from genuine to grudging. Margaret Finch approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Eliza, you got what you wanted," she said sweetly. "And what's that, Margaret?" "Security, a husband, a respectable position in this town." Her eyes glittered. "Though we all know how you got it." Caleb stepped between them. "That's enough." I said that's enough." His voice could have cut glass. "Eliza is my wife now. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me, and I have a very long memory." Margaret paled slightly, then recovered. "Of course, my apologies." She swept away, back rigid. They loaded into the wagon and headed home, back to the ranch that was now officially Eliza's as much as Caleb's. The ride passed in silence until Ivy spoke up from between them. "Are you going to kiss again when we get home?" "Ivy," Caleb warned. "What? Married people kiss. Mrs. Patterson told Jenny that's how you know they really love each other." "Mrs. Patterson needs to mind her own business." But Ivy's question hung in the air. What did happen now? They were married, but they'd never discussed the practicalities. Separate rooms, shared rooms? How did people navigate a marriage built on necessity rather than love? They'd figure it out. They had to. Because as they crested the ridge and the ranch came into view, their ranch, their home, Eliza realized there was no going back now. For better or worse, she was Eliza Mercer. And somehow, looking at the man beside her and the girl between them, that didn't feel quite as terrifying as it should have. The first night as husband and wife, they stood in the upstairs hallway like strangers trying to figure out where they belonged. Caleb had moved his things into the spare room earlier that morning, leaving the master bedroom, his and Mary's room, conspicuously empty. "You should take the big room," he said, not meeting her eyes. "It's yours now." Eliza looked at the closed door and felt her stomach twist. "I can't sleep in there." Why not? Because it was hers. It would feel like she stopped, searching for words. Like I'm trying to erase her. You're my wife now. That's your room. Then we'll share it. The words came out before she'd thought them through. Caleb's eyes widened. Eliza, not like that, she said quickly, heat flooding her face. I mean, we can put up a screen or something, separate sides. But if I'm supposed to be your wife, it'll look strange if we're in different rooms. People talk, Caleb. You know they do. He considered this. You sure? No, but it makes sense. So they rearranged the room with awkward efficiency, moving furniture to create two distinct spaces separated by a folding screen Caleb found in the attic. His side had the bed. Her side got a smaller cot they brought up from storage, a dresser, and a chair. It was the strangest wedding night in the history of wedding nights. Eliza changed behind the screen, hyper-aware of every sound, the rustle of fabric, Caleb's boots hitting the floor, the creak of the bed as he settled in. She lay on the narrow cot in her nightgown, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe 20 feet away. This is awkward, Caleb said into the darkness. Extremely. Should we talk? About what? I don't know. Married people talk, right? I have no idea what married people do in this situation. A pause. Then Caleb's voice softer. Thank you for going through with it. You already thanked me. I know, but I mean it. You could have left, could have let the town win. Instead, He stopped. You married me. That's not nothing. Eliza rolled onto her side, facing the screen that separated them. You think they'll leave us alone now? For a while. Then they'll find something else to whisper about. That's a depressing thought. That's small-town life. They fell silent. Somewhere downstairs, the clock chimed midnight. Caleb? Yeah? What happens now? What do you mean? I mean, we're married, but we don't love each other. We barely know each other. How does this work? He was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, I guess we figure it out as we go. Try to be good partners. Raise Ivy right. Build something that works even if it's not... He stopped. Not a love story, Eliza finished. Yeah. She closed her eyes. I can live with that. Can you? I did it before. With Daniel, it was love from the start. But there were still days we had to choose partnership over passion. Days we were just two people trying to survive together. Her throat tightened. Maybe that's all marriage really is. Choosing to stay even when it's hard. That's probably the most honest thing anyone's ever said about marriage. My mama used to say romance gets you to the altar, but stubbornness keeps you there. Caleb laughed quietly. Your mama sounds like she was smart. She was. Another silence. Then Caleb said, Good night, Eliza. Good night. She lay awake for hours, listening to him breathe, and tried to imagine a future where this strange arrangement felt normal. Morning came too early. Eliza woke to weak sunlight filtering through the curtains and the immediate disorienting realization that she was married. She dressed quickly behind the screen, then went downstairs to start breakfast. Ivy was already in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her doll. Morning, Mama, she said cheerfully. Eliza froze with her hand on the coffee pot. Ivy, honey, you don't have to call me that. But you're married to Papa now. That makes you my mama. I'm your stepmother. That's different. Ivy's face fell. You don't want to be my mama? It's not that. It's just, your real mama was Mary. I don't want you to forget her. I won't forget her. Ivy spoke with the confidence of the very young. I'll remember Mama Mary, and I'll have you too. Can I call you Mama Eliza? The compromise was so simple, so childlike, that Eliza's eyes stung. If you want to, she managed. Okay. Mama Eliza, can we have pancakes? Just like that, the crisis was resolved. Caleb came downstairs 20 minutes later, drawn by the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, Eliza at the stove, Ivy setting the table, the morning light turning everything golden. This is nice, he said quietly. Don't get used to it. I burned the first batch of pancakes. Mary burned pancakes all the time. The statement hung there, unexpected. Eliza turned to look at him. She did? Constantly. Could never get the temperature right. A small smile played at his lips. I'd eat them anyway and pretend they were perfect. She knew, but we kept up the fiction. It was the first time he'd mentioned Mary without pain shadowing his voice. Something about that felt significant. They ate breakfast as a family, awkward and new, but functioning. Ivy chattered about the chickens and whether they could get a dog, and how Jenny's mother had actually nodded to her at the general store yesterday. She nodded? Caleb asked. Just a little, but she didn't look away like usual. Small victories. After breakfast, Caleb went out to work the ranch, and Eliza started on laundry. Ivy followed her around, helping in the way 6-year-olds help, which mostly meant making more work. But Eliza didn't mind. The girl's constant presence felt grounding, like proof that this strange new life was real. They were hanging sheets on the line when a wagon appeared on the road. Eliza's stomach clenched, expecting more town council members or church ladies coming to inspect the new marriage. But as the wagon got closer, she realized the driver was a woman she'd never seen before. Older, maybe 60, with steel gray hair and a face that suggested she didn't suffer fools. The wagon pulled up, and the woman climbed down with surprising agility. "You must be Eliza," she said without preamble. "I'm Dorothy Mercer, Caleb's aunt." Eliza wiped her wet hands on her apron. "Mrs. Mercer, we didn't know you were coming." "That's because I didn't tell anyone. Heard my nephew got married in a hurry and figured I should come see what kind of woman would take on him and his daughter." Her eyes swept over Eliza, assessing. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone prettier and younger and more obviously scheming." Eliza blinked. Thank you?" That wasn't necessarily a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. Dorothy turned to Ivy, who'd been hiding behind Eliza's skirts. "And you must be Ivy. You look like your mother." Ivy's face crumpled slightly at the mention of Mary. Dorothy crouched down with a grunt. "I knew your mama when she was about your age. Did she ever tell you about the time she put a frog in the minister's coffee?" Ivy's eyes widened. "No." "Well, she did. And when he drank it, or almost drank it, she laughed so hard she fell off her chair. Your grandma was furious, but your mama never apologized. Said the minister was too serious and needed livening up." Dorothy's eyes crinkled. "You got any of that spark in you?" Slowly, Ivy nodded. "Good. World needs more girls with spark." Dorothy stood, knees cracking. "Now where's my nephew?" Caleb appeared from the barn, drawn by the sound of an unfamiliar wagon. When he saw Dorothy, his face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, wariness, and finally something that looked like relief. "Aunt Dot, what are you doing here?" "Came to meet your wife. Make sure you haven't completely lost your mind." She looked between him and Eliza. "Jury's still out on that." They went inside, and Dorothy made herself at home, inspecting the kitchen with a critical eye while Eliza made tea. The older woman didn't miss much, noting the clean floors, the organized pantry, the fresh curtains Eliza had hung last week. "You keep a good house," Dorothy said finally. "Thank you. Mary was better at decorating, but you're better at actual cleaning. She always cared more about how things looked than how they functioned." Dorothy sipped her tea. "Not a criticism, just an observation." Eliza didn't know what to say to that. Dorothy turned to Caleb. "So, you want to tell me what really happened here? Because the version I heard in town makes no sense. You don't marry someone you barely know unless there's either love or desperation involved. And you don't strike me as the love at first sight type." "It's complicated," Caleb said. "Life's always complicated. Explain it anyway." So he did. Told her about Ivy's grief, about Eliza helping, about the town's reaction, about the threats to take Ivy away. He laid it all out plainly, without embellishment. Dorothy listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat back in her chair and studied them both. "So you married to protect the girl," she said. "Partly. And the other part?" Caleb glanced at Eliza. "The other part is that it felt right, in a strange way. Like maybe this could work. You love her? I respect her. I trust her. And I think, maybe, that's a better foundation than passion." Dorothy's expression softened slightly. "Your uncle and I had a marriage like that. He proposed because his farm needed a woman's touch, and I needed a place to belong. We figured out love later. Took years, but we got there. She looked at Eliza. You willing to wait years? I don't know what I'm willing to wait for, Eliza said honestly, but I'm willing to try. Good enough. Dorothy stood. Now I'm staying for a week. I'll sleep in the spare room, and I want to see how you people actually function together. If I think this marriage is a disaster waiting to happen, I'll say so. If I think it's got potential, I'll help smooth things over with the town. They'll listen to me. I'm old and mean enough that people respect my opinion, even when they don't like it. Caleb looked torn between gratitude and exasperation. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. Now show me to my room before my knees give out completely. Having Dorothy in the house changed the dynamic completely. She was sharp-tongued and opinionated, but she was also practical and surprisingly kind. She taught Ivy card games and told stories about Mary that made the girl laugh instead of cry. She helped Eliza with the endless work of running a ranch household, sharing tricks and shortcuts Mary had never known. And she watched, always watched. On the third day of her visit, Eliza found Dorothy sitting on the porch snapping green beans. Sit, the older woman commanded. Eliza sat. You're good with Ivy, Dorothy said without looking up from her work. Thank you. But you're terrified of Caleb. Eliza's hand stilled. I'm not terrified like he'll hurt you. Terrified like you might start to care about him and it'll blow up in your face. Dorothy's fingers moved steadily. Snap, snap, snap. I recognize that look. Had it myself once. How did you... Eliza stopped. How did you get past it? Decided being alone was worse than being hurt. Took that leap. She glanced at Eliza. Of course, I was younger than you. Had more time to recover if it went wrong. But the principle's the same. What if I'm not brave enough? Then you'll spend your whole life in that halfway space. Married, but not married. Together, but alone. That's no way to live, girl. Eliza looked out at the valley, at Caleb working near the barn, at Ivy chasing chickens in the yard. I already lost one husband, she said quietly. I don't know if I can survive losing another. So don't lose him. Fight for it. Build something strong enough that it doesn't break. Dorothy's voice was firm. Marriage isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you make every day, with small choices and hard work and deciding that this person, this life, is worth the effort. What if he doesn't want that? What if he's content with what we have, a partnership, nothing more? Then you tell him you want more. See what he says. Might surprise you. That night, after Ivy and Dorothy had gone to bed, Eliza and Caleb sat in the main room with cold coffee between them. It had become their routine, these late-night conversations in low voices, carefully navigating around the bigger questions. But Dorothy's words echoed in Eliza's head, and she found herself speaking before she'd planned what to say. Are you happy? She asked. Caleb looked up, surprised. What? With this, our arrangement. Are you happy? He set down his cup slowly. I'm content. The house runs smoothly. Ivy's thriving. You and I work well together. That's more than I expected. But are you happy? I don't know if I remember what happy feels like. Not since Mary died. That's not an answer. He studied her face in the lamplight. What are you really asking? Eliza took a breath. Let it out. I'm asking if you want more than this. More than partnership and politeness. Or if this is all we're ever going to be. The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I don't know what more would look like. Neither do I. But, she struggled for words. I'm tired of living in the margins, of being halfway to something but never arriving. I did that for 2 years after Daniel died, just existing without living. I don't want to do it anymore. What do you want? I want to stop sleeping on a cot in the corner of your room like a servant. I want to stop pretending we're roommates instead of married. I want... She stopped, surprised by her own boldness. I want to try, really try, to build something real. Caleb stood and crossed to the window, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I'm scared. Of what? Of letting you in and then losing you. Of giving Ivy a mother just to have her ripped away again. Of... He stopped. Of forgetting Mary completely. You won't forget her. Love doesn't work like that. There's enough room in a heart for more than one person. He turned to look at her. You sound sure. I'm not, but I'm willing to find out. They stood there, the room heavy with unspoken things, until Caleb crossed back to where she sat. If we do this, really do this, I need you to promise me something, he said. What? Don't leave, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much we fight or how scared you get. Don't leave. Eliza thought about her cold room above the feed store, about 2 years of emptiness and grief, about Ivy calling her Mama Eliza and the way Caleb's face softened when he thought no one was watching. I promise, she said. If you promise the same. Don't shut me out when things get hard. Don't retreat into silence. Actually try. I promise. They sealed it with a handshake that turned into something more. Not quite a hug, not quite an embrace, but a closeness that felt like the beginning of something. Dorothy left at the end of the week with a promise to spread word through the county that the Mercer marriage was legitimate and functional. She hugged Ivy fiercely, gave Caleb a knowing look, and pulled Eliza aside for one last piece of advice. It won't be easy, she said. Marriage never is, even when it starts with love. But you're both stubborn enough to make it work. That counts for something. Thank you for coming, for accepting me. I didn't come here to accept you. I came to decide if you were worth defending. Dorothy's eyes crinkled. Turns out you are. Now don't make me regret it. After she left, the house felt emptier but also more settled, like they'd passed some invisible test. That night, Eliza and Caleb took down the screen in their room. They still slept in separate beds, but they were in the same space without barriers. It was a small change, but it felt monumental. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Small things at first, hands brushing when passing dishes at dinner, Caleb asking her opinion on ranch business, Eliza letting him read to Ivy at bedtime while she sat nearby mending clothes. They started eating breakfast together instead of in shifts, started talking about the future in concrete terms, repairs needed on the barn, whether to buy more chickens, if they should plant a bigger garden come spring. They started acting like partners. And then slowly, something more. It happened in increments. Caleb reaching for her hand when they walked to the barn, Eliza leaning against his shoulder when they sat on the porch, a goodnight kiss that lasted longer than strictly necessary, conversations that went late into the night, ranging from practical to personal to intimate. They learned each other, the way Caleb's jaw tightened when he was worried, how Eliza hummed when she was content, the small tells and habits that made them individuals instead of strangers sharing a house. 3 months after the wedding, Caleb asked if Eliza wanted to move into the big bed. She said yes. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, Eliza realized she'd stopped measuring this marriage against her first one. It wasn't better or worse than what she'd had with Daniel. It was just different, built on different foundations, growing at its own pace. Can I tell you something? Caleb whispered. Anything. I think I'm falling in love with you. Eliza's breath caught. You think? I'm not sure what love is supposed to feel like the second time around. It's not like it was with Mary, that wild young thing. This is quieter, more solid, like building a house instead of lighting a fire. I know what you mean. Do you feel it too? Eliza turned to face him, barely able to make out his features in the dark. Yeah, I do. He kissed her then, and it was different from their wedding day peck or the careful goodnight kisses they'd been trading. This was real. Wanting, a promise of more to come. When they pulled apart, Eliza was crying. What's wrong? Caleb asked, alarmed. Nothing. Everything. She laughed through the tears. I didn't think I'd get this again. A person who wanted me. A home that felt safe. I thought that part of my life was over. Me too. They lay tangled together, and for the first time since Daniel died, Eliza felt whole. Spring arrived slowly, then all at once. The snow melted, revealing muddy ground that would soon turn green. Caleb and Eliza worked side by side, preparing the ranch for the growing season, while Ivy ran wild, rediscovering outdoor play after the long winter. The town's attitude toward them had shifted too, though not dramatically. A few families started letting their children play with Ivy again. Margaret Finch still pursed her lips whenever she saw Eliza, but she'd stopped making comments. The minister actually greeted them by name after Sunday service. Small victories, but they added up. One Saturday in late April, they took Ivy to the market, the same market where everything had started 6 months earlier. Eliza set up a stall selling pies and bread, just like before, but this time Caleb and Ivy stayed with her instead of moving on. People stopped to buy. Some were polite, some still standoffish, but business was steady. Toward noon, a young mother approached with a toddler who wouldn't stop crying. "I'm sorry," the woman said, looking exhausted. "She's teething and won't eat anything." Eliza looked at the fussy child and remembered a different little girl months ago who'd also refused to eat. "Can I try something?" she asked. She tore off a small piece of cinnamon bread, shaped it into a star, and handed it to the toddler. The child took it, stopped crying, ate. The mother's eyes filled with tears. "How did you—" "Sometimes they just need it offered the right way," Eliza said gently. The woman bought 3 loaves and left blessing Eliza's name. Caleb watched this exchange with something like wonder. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "It's not a gift. It's just paying attention, seeing what people need instead of what you want to give them." "Still a gift." That night, after Ivy was asleep, they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, "about expanding the ranch, maybe breeding horses instead of just cattle. We could build something bigger, leave Ivy with real security. We'd need help, more hands." "I know, but I think we could do it. Together." Eliza leaned against his shoulder. "Together. I like the sound of that." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing you don't have to fill every quiet moment with words. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I love you." She felt him go still beside her. Then his arm came around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "I love you too. For real. Not the tentative maybe I do kind. The actual, certain, want to build a life with you kind." "Good. Because you're stuck with me now." "Best kind of stuck there is." 2 years later, Eliza stood in the kitchen of a house that finally felt like hers, not Mary's ghost. Caleb came in from the barn with Ivy, now 8, gangly and confident, chattering about the new foal that had been born overnight. "Can I name her, Mama Eliza, please?" "Ask your father." "Ask me what?" Caleb set down his hat and pulled Eliza into a brief kiss that still made her stomach flutter. "If I can name the foal Star." "Star's a good name." "Sure." Ivy whooped and ran back outside. Caleb wrapped his arms around Eliza from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder while she worked on dinner. "How was town?" he asked. "Good. Margaret Finch actually complimented my pie." "The world must be ending." "Right?" Eliza laughed. "Oh, and Sarah Hendricks asked if I'd help with the church social next month. They need someone to organize the food." "You gonna do it?" "I think so. Feels like, I don't know, like I'm finally part of things instead of just tolerated." "You've always been part of things. They just took a while to figure it out." Eliza turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever regret it? How we started? Marrying you?" "The circumstances, the rushed wedding, the gossip, all of it." Caleb pretended to think about it. "Well, I did miss out on a proper courtship. No flowers, no romantic declarations, no wooing." She swatted his chest. "But no," he continued, more seriously, "I don't regret any of it. Maybe it wasn't the story people want to hear. Maybe it started practical instead of passionate. But look where we ended up." He gestured around at the warm kitchen, at Ivy playing outside, at the life they'd built together. "This is real. This matters. And I wouldn't change how we got here. Even the parts where everyone called me a floozy. Especially those parts. They gave us something to prove. And we proved it." Eliza kissed him properly then, the kind of kiss that said, "I choose you," every day, over and over. When they pulled apart, Ivy was standing in the doorway, making exaggerated gagging sounds. "You two are disgusting," she announced. "Wait till you're older," Caleb said. "Someday you'll find someone you want to kiss like that." "Doubtful. Boys are stupid." "Smart girl," Eliza said. "Done." They ate dinner as the sun set, filling the kitchen with amber light. Ivy told elaborate stories about the foal and her plans to train it for barrel racing. Caleb talked about the new breeding program he wanted to start. Eliza listened to both of them, content. Later, after Ivy was in bed, she and Caleb sat in their room, no screens or cots or separate spaces, and talked about nothing and everything. Do you think about her still? Eliza asked. Mary? Sometimes. Less than I used to. He took her hand. Doesn't mean I forgot her. Just means I made room for you too. Big difference. I think about Daniel that way, like he's part of my past that made me who I am, but not holding me back anymore. We're a pair, aren't we? Two people who lost everything and somehow found each other in the wreckage. Found each other because of the wreckage, Eliza corrected. If you hadn't been desperate, we never would have. Don't sell us short. Maybe desperation brought us together, but we stayed because we wanted to. That's the part that matters. He was right, Eliza realized. They'd had 100 opportunities to give up, to walk away, to settle for a loveless arrangement. But they'd chosen each other, again and again, until choice became commitment, became love. That was the real story. Not the dramatic beginning, or the town's judgment, or even the eventual acceptance. The story was in the small moments, the shared coffee, the quiet conversations, the decision to keep trying when it would have been easier to quit. I'm glad I stayed, Eliza said. Me too. They settled into bed, and Eliza thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, mocked, invisible, convinced her life was over at 35. That woman wouldn't recognize who she'd become. A wife, a mother, a person who mattered. The town had tried to bury her with gossip and judgment and cruelty. Instead, she'd planted roots and grown. Years from now, people in Black Hollow would barely remember the scandal. They'd just know the Mercers, the ranching family up past Eagle Ridge, the ones with the daughter who trained horses, and the mother who made the best pies in the county. They'd forget that Eliza had once been the woman everyone mocked, the widow people pitied and dismissed. She'd become something better than acceptable. She'd become essential. On a warm Sunday in June, 3 years after their wedding, the Mercer family hosted a gathering at the ranch. Dorothy had come to visit and insisted they show off what they'd built. So Caleb invited the neighbors, and to everyone's surprise, most of them came. The yard filled with people. Children ran wild, including Ivy leading a pack of former skeptics in an elaborate game involving the barn and imaginary dragons. Adults talked business and weather and local gossip. Eliza moved through it all with confidence she'd earned, offering food and conversation, no longer afraid of judgment. Margaret Finch approached her with what might have been the closest thing to a smile Eliza had ever seen on her face. "Your home is lovely, Mrs. Mercer," she said. "Thank you, Margaret." The older woman struggled. "I may have been hasty in my initial judgment of your situation." "You may have been," Eliza agreed mildly. "It's clear you've made a good life here. With Caleb and Ivy, that speaks for itself." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was acknowledgement, and for Margaret Finch, that was almost the same thing. "I appreciate that," Eliza said. After Margaret moved on, Caleb appeared at Eliza's side. "Did Margaret Finch just compliment you?" "In her own way. I really do think the world is ending." They stood together watching their neighbors fill the ranch with life and laughter. Ivy ran past with 3 other children, all of them shrieking with joy. Dorothy held court near the food table, telling stories that had people roaring with laughter. "We did good," Caleb said quietly. "We did. I know it wasn't easy. The beginning was what it needed to be," Eliza interrupted. "Stop apologizing for how we started. We're here now. That's what counts." He pulled her close, right there in front of everyone, and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Eliza Mercer." "I love you too." And she meant it, completely, wholly, without reservation. She'd learned something in these years of building a life from broken pieces. Love wasn't always the lightning strike, the instant recognition, the fairy tale beginning. Sometimes it was the slow accumulation of moments. The choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The decision to trust when fear said run. The willingness to build something real instead of waiting for something perfect. She'd been the woman everyone mocked, and she'd become the woman who proved them wrong. Not through revenge or vindication, but through the simple act of living well, of choosing kindness over bitterness, hope over despair, love over fear. That evening, after everyone had gone home and Ivy was asleep, Eliza and Caleb sat on their porch watching the stars emerge. The valley spread before them, peaceful and familiar. Home in every sense of the word. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked. How far we've come. How different everything is from where we started. Better different or just different? Better. Definitely better. She leaned against him. I was so scared that first night. Thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And now? Now I know it was the best decision I ever made. Even with all the mess and complications and fear, choosing this, choosing you, choosing to try, that saved me. You saved yourself, Caleb said. I just gave you a place to do it. Maybe that was true. Maybe they'd both saved each other, or maybe they just created the space where healing could happen. Either way, they'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something worth having. In the years to come, the Mercer Ranch would grow and prosper. Ivy would grow up confident and strong, equally comfortable with horses and people. She'd tell her own children someday about her mother Mary, who she'd loved and lost, and her mother Eliza, who'd taught her that family wasn't just blood, but choice and commitment. The town would gradually forget there'd ever been scandal attached to the Mercer name. They'd know Eliza as the woman who always had time to help a struggling neighbor, whose kindness was matched only by her practicality. They'd remember the day she arrived in Black Hollow, not the gossip and judgment, but the fact that she'd stayed and built something lasting. But all of that was still to come. Tonight, in the quiet darkness of a Montana valley, two people who'd found each other in grief sat together and counted themselves lucky. They'd been given a second chance at life and love, and they'd taken it with both hands and refused to let go. That was enough. That was everything. The woman they'd tried to mock had become the heart of a family, the soul of a home, the proof that sometimes the best stories don't start with love at first sight. Sometimes they start with a hungry child, a piece of cinnamon bread, and two broken people brave enough to build something whole.